Stage is yours.
No, I'm just going to put this down here. I'm going to try walking without the crutch. You've probably seen me walking around. Wow, I've never seen my head be that big. That's kind of frightening, actually. So anyway, hi everyone, I'm Henry Hwong, and I'm excited to be here. And thank you to the PODIM team for inviting me to come over here and talk a little bit about the kind of stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis with our clients. And it was interesting talking backstage with Shira, who just went off the stage. A lot of the stuff that she does and what I do actually complement each other quite well. And you know what? I don't have a clicker. There's where it is. All right. So we're talking about winning the market battle. We're talking about DNA. How do those things work well together? Okay. What it's really all about positioning. And if there's only one thing that you get out of my little talk today, and I won't fall down, I promise. I don't need another set of crutches. But it's that positioning really matters. It is very important today. Now more than ever, positioning is probably the most important thing you can do for your company. And especially today, when the market is a battlefield, it's very noisy. Your target customers are all being bombarded, whether they're consumers, whether they're enterprise companies, all these different government agencies, everybody's being bombarded by tons of content, email campaigns, all these different things. And so you, especially if you're a startup, what are you saying about yourself that helps you rise above all this digital noise and get people to stand up and pay attention to you? So if you think about it, positioning is all about that war for the white space in the mind of your target customer. That's what it's all about. What is that space? What is that real estate you could credibly occupy in the mind of your target customer, and then gives you an opportunity to grow out of that? Now, I said it's a noisy environment, right? And so everybody knows about elevator pitches. There you have 15 seconds, 20 seconds. You have go how many floors to pitch what you're doing. Today, with so much noise out there, you almost have 5 seconds to tell people what you do. And if you can do it in one sentence, that's even better. So that's what positioning is. It's a single sentence that describes your role and relevance to your market and to the world. So that's what that's all about. So positioning, yeah, it's been around for a while. So actually, the concept isn't new. It's been around since the 70s. It was developed by these two gentlemen in the advertising industry, Al Rees and Jack Trout. They came out with a seminal book on positioning. And how they described positioning in context of advertising was the singular idea that drove the creative behind advertising. And so, in fact, positioning, you hear, if you've worked with a lot of marketing agencies or branding agencies, they all talk about, oh yeah, positioning, it's part of brand. Let's call it brand positioning. Now, I'm not gonna go in and start talking about a definition for brand. I always tell people that brand is such an overused word. Everybody has different definition. If you put 5 or 10, well, let's just use 10. If you put 10 marketing and branding people in the same room and ask them to define brand, you'll probably get a dozen or 12 different definitions. That's how widely overused and misused type of term. But anyway, so a lot of people think that positioning is just an aspect of your brand. I disagree. I think, and I believe, and when we work with our clients, that positioning is actually as important as brand itself. It is actually something you need to do before you actually embark on any marketing campaigns, any PR you do, any sort of new logo you're going to ask your agency to do. Positioning has to happen first. And why is that? So I described positioning as a single statement that talks about what your role and relevance and how you're different. It's a rational statement, right? Branding is all about emotion, right? Branding is synonymous with emotion. But a brand is empty without strong positioning. Okay? You can't ask your target audience or target customers to build emotion around something they don't rationally understand why they should care about it. Okay? So to me, positioning is just as important. So it's not part of brand, it's equal to brand. But the two sides work together, and we always use this yin-yang sort of present diagram to show that these two things work well together to create the identity of the company. And that's what we want to do. So brand is an important aspect, but don't forget the positioning. That's really important. Okay. So when we work with a lot of clients, we always remind people that positioning or your marketing or your brand is actually, you have to think about it differently now. It's no longer a wrapper around things. It's actually a public articulation of your strategy, okay? And so what applies to strategy also applies to your positioning and your marketing, right? What they always say, and I think you heard it earlier, is what you don't do is just as important as what you do. It's all about focus. And especially if you're a startup with limited budget and you want to do all these wonderful things, but the challenge you have is that you're part of what you want to build is this big. You cannot go to market like that. In order to leverage maximize the return on the kind of marketing spend that you want to have, it's all about sending a consistent and reliable message, a repeated message to the market. Because they always tell you, right, the first time they don't hear you, the second time they might remember you, and the third time is where they actually start thinking about what you do. And so you want to have that consistent message. And it's important to be credible. It really is. Because credibility, especially in marketing, is a huge, huge thing. Because when you're introducing yourself to your customers the first time, if you're promising all these different things that you're going to do and you can't do it, then you've lost that customer forever. It's really hard to come back from losing your credibility. So that's above the waterline in this diagram. So it's what you credibly can deliver now and in the near future. Now, you may have all these different plans, all these different things that you want to do. You want to build a platform. You're building a marketplace for 20 verticals. You're going to go grow into South America. And that's great. But if you're not ready to deliver on that, that's not something you should be doing in your positioning or your marketing. It's below the waterline, okay? And so that's how you should think about positioning. It's all really about sacrifice. It's really about focus. Now, in technology, we're always about the future, right? All flying cars and all that good stuff. So when people buy technology, they also want to buy with the future in mind. That's how people buy all these new things, right? Especially when they're not fully baked. And so it's okay to show a little bit about the future. So in thinking about how you position your company, the trick is really finding the right waterline between what you can do today versus what you can do tomorrow, and balance that out to get the kind of marketing, the kind of positioning that you should be doing. So when we tell our clients, okay, you must focus on today, you only can talk about today, they're like, but wait a minute, if I only talk about today and I'm planning on doing this tomorrow, am I putting myself in a box? No, you're not. Because positioning, like strategy, like a lot of things, can evolve over time. Now, I'm not saying you should change your marketing every 3 months. That's not a good idea. But your marketing and your positioning should reflect the state of your company as it exists. So you look at these examples today, from Amazon, from Salesforce, and from Facebook. You can see what their position statements are when they started and what they are today. I always like, Amazon is a great example. So in 1997, when they were still the online retailer for books, and I think they started selling CDs and DVDs at the time. But when they filed their paperwork, their S1 to go on IPO, if you actually look at how Jeff Bezos described what Amazon was, he said that it was the online retailer for information services. This was in 1997. Information services. Now, does that mean he was predicting that he was going to have Amazon Prime, AWS, the Echo, all these different things? No, that's not what that means. But what it does mean is that he had a deeper strategy to go win the market. As we like to say, he win the world one bite at a time. But he didn't go to market that way because he couldn't credibly deliver on the other information services. So it's okay. Your positioning can change over time. Right? Do I have to dance? Okay. So what makes great for great positioning? It's all about your differentiation. It's all about what makes you different. Again, so important for startups. Because if you're probably going in there, you're going into a noisy market, you need to identify what makes you uniquely suited to serve your customers, right? I don't know how many times we've talked to clients, and their first complaint, especially the sales guys, they're like, okay, we put out brand new marketing, brand new messaging, new collateral, and in a week, it's on the website of our customers, of our competitors. And so it doesn't matter what we say, our competitors are just going to imitate what we do. You know what that tells me? That tells me your messaging and your positioning was not unique enough. Because if you're going to state what your differentiation is, you have to have an only statement to it. We are the only ones that deliver this way. That's when you determine what how your stuff is really differentiated. And especially if you're a startup, you're a blank slate to the market. So you have to define that. And what I saw on the slide, what I showed on the slide earlier, if you don't position yourself, your competitors are going to position you, and you're not going to like what they say about you. So it's important to take that into consideration. So, all right. So how do you figure out what that differentiation is? How do you figure that out? And why does it matter today? Well, in today's world, in the old days, now I can only speak to the U.S. because I'm American, but in the days of 3 channels and your daily newspaper, it was very much a very constrained information environment. So if your company does something different or bad, there's a limited scope of damage to your brand. But in today's world, where all you have to do is have somebody take a picture of a dog being put on an overhead bin to have it go spread completely around the world, companies cannot afford to make promises with your brand that you cannot deliver. Is United Airlines all about customer service? No, they can talk about it, but it's not. But people clearly can see that it's not true in that respect, right? So in that sense, a brand is inauthentic. So what a lot of people say is that brands come from within, and I completely agree with it. It's at the core. What your brand and what your marketing is doing is making promises that your organization has to deliver. So if you're going to make promises, your company has to deliver them. So you have to look inward. It's like the DNA of your organization. Now, why DNA? Well, companies are like people. Companies are absolutely it helps that they're all filled with people. But it's true that and so an organization has its own unique set of processes, people, culture, all these different things. And that actually guides how you deliver your products and services. So you need to really step back and understand the DNA of your company very well before you actually think about how to differentiate your company. So this company DNA framework, actually, it's been developed over the last 12 years. The founder of our firm, her name is Andrea or Andy Cunningham. she's been working with Silicon Valley companies for the last 30 years and actually started off at Regis McKenna and actually worked right next to Steve Jobs to launch the Macintosh, the next computer, and Pixar. But she will tell you this, is that she's been doing positioning for 30 years. And in that time, she actually spent some time thinking about how she came up, because typically when you talk to an agency and they want to do positioning, it's a creative exercise. But actually, what she was doing was in her mind, she was her own little mind figuring things out, and she discovered that actually, if you look at all types of companies, especially in technology, there's only 3 types of companies out there. There are consumer-facing companies, we call them mothers, that they're built to serve, overserve, and give great customer service. There are product-centric companies that are built to build the best products out in the world and sell it to everybody. And then this is something that you see a lot in Silicon Valley and a bunch of different startups, is there are concept companies or missionaries. And they're out to change the world or change some behavior. So as you can see some of the examples here, a mother type of company can be like, everybody here familiar with Zappos? Very great service, great shoes, and you can return them at any time. That's a typical customer type of company. A typical product type of company is like a Microsoft or an Oracle. And a missionary company is, I'd say Apple was before Steve Jobs passed away, but Google, Salesforce, those types of companies. So there are 3 types of companies out there. And what's unique about these companies is this is not a surface change, right? These actually go deep. These companies operate differently. A customer company does not operate the same as a product company and they don't operate the same as a missionary company. They measure things differently, they're organized differently, they hire different employees. Now, of course, in helping to identify the DNA of your company, just because you're one doesn't mean you don't have aspects on the other. So like if you're an engineering-driven company that only cares about products, that doesn't mean you can't spend any money on customer support. You can't do that. But you may do it differently. So instead of putting a bunch of people in a call center to answer the phone for customer service, you may do it online. You may do it in a more efficient way because you're looking at customer service as a cost center. But in the end, your DNA, you have a leading part of your DNA that you express, and understanding that will help you differentiate your company. So I mentioned that they operate differently. So here's an example. Typically, a product-centric company is since they're selling one product to everybody in the world, they're all occupied about market share. But if you're a customer-driven company, you're thinking about the customer relationship. You're thinking about wallet share. We often run this exercise to help our clients understand, if you had an incremental euro to spend on your company, where would you spend it? A customer-driven company would probably spend it on account management or customer support. A product-centric company would probably spend it on engineering. And if you're a missionary or a concept-driven company, you're all about getting your message to market, spending it on marketing, thought leadership campaigns, public relations, all these different things. So each company actually operates differently. So that's how you have to think about it when you're talking about your brand. So we talked about how it impacts your differentiation. This is how it impacts your differentiation. So customer-centric companies can differentiate based on either a customer support or a customer experience, having great customer experience, like Lyft, if you're familiar with how they operate in the US for ride sharing, or by segment, Yandex, which was a client of ours. You would think that they're built like Google, but the thing is, the key to understanding their company is actually they're very focused on the regions they serve in the former CIS countries. So that's an example of the segmentation. So product-centric companies are either about features, I mentioned Microsoft before, but the other is Ryanair. They're all about giving value, flying very cheaply. So that's how they differentiate. And then you have concept-driven companies like Salesforce. They changed behavior. They changed how companies bought enterprise software. It used to be license plus maintenance, and you had to install it somewhere. they changed it to a utility, subscription-based, cloud-based, all these different things. They spent a lot of money on marketing. Or there's oftentimes a cult of personality around there. So Virgin is an interesting one. I don't even know half the things that Richard Branson is doing, but there's always a cult of personality around Richard Branson and all the different things that he's doing. So understanding your DNA of the company will help you understand how you can differentiate yourself in the market and get great positioning. So time's up, but I'll give myself one more minute just to show you an example. So how many people here are familiar with Lyft? Okay. So Lyft is the #2 ride-sharing company in the US. And there was an interesting story that came out. So if you're familiar with the information, it's an email newsletter that a lot of people in Silicon Valley read every day. And they talked about Lyft's missteps. They weren't able to take advantage of Uber's missteps in all the problems that they were having to become the leader in ride sharing. But were they really missteps? Or was it the customer DNA expressing itself? Because as a lot of people here know, if you're familiar with Lyft, they call themselves a friend with a car, right? They're all about giving that great customer-friendly, safe experience to their riders and their drivers and being very driver-friendly. And what was happening, they hired somebody named Travis Van Der Zanden who was trying to grow the company very large, but what he was doing from the inside was trying to change the company into being like an Uber clone. Uber is more like a product-centric company. And what you saw what happened is that he was pretty successful in doing the growth, but he didn't achieve all the things he wanted to do because the culture, the DNA of the company was not a product-centric company. It was a customer-centric company. That's how profound these things have to be. And they always talk about culture eats strategy. It's entirely true. And that's the same when it comes to marketing and brand. So, in the end, company DNA, very important to how you do your marketing. So, in the end, you need to know everything about yourself so you can make the best of what you have. Thank you.